Evening. This is Wednesday, October 4th, 34 days until the 2006 midterm elections, and Richard Nixon speaks to politicians from beyond yet again. It's never the crime, it's the cover-up. Our fifth story on the countdown, Congressman Mark Foley is safely in the gentler penalty box that is rehab, while Foley's former chief of staff had to quit his most recent job today, then told reporters he'd warned the office of Speaker of the House Hastert 3 years ago about Foley, and he's now reportedly heading to tell all tomorrow to the FBI. While a second thread of lying stretches in another direction, and still further back in time, new reports that male congressional pages were warned about a then-freshman Republican from Florida in 1995. Dennis Hastert's post as Speaker of the House clearly hanging by a thread tonight. The New York Times reporting that one plan being floated by senior Republicans is for Mr. Hastert to announce that he would not seek re-election as Speaker should the Republicans retain control of the House. That would thereby save themselves a leadership fight before Election Day. The latest charges against the Speaker coming from Kirk Fordham, as we mentioned, resigning today from his job as Chief of Staff for Republican Congressman Tom Reynolds of New York. He used to serve in the same capacity for Congressman Foley and is alleged to have protected his boss from any investigation of his behavior. Mr. Fordham saying today he is being made a scapegoat by other senior congressional staff members. Quote, "At no point ever did I ask anyone to block any inquiries into Foley's actions or behavior. I will fully disclose to the FBI and the House Ethics Committee any and all meetings and phone calls I had with senior staffers in the House leadership about any of Foley's inappropriate activities." It's Fordham who said that as Foley's chief of staff, he warned Hastert's chief of staff, Scott Palmer, in 2003, adding to ABC News that he was then told Palmer had met with Congressman Foley and that Hastert knew about that meeting. Mr. Palmer tonight says what Kirk Fordham said did not happen. The last new development of the day, the Justice Department sending a letter to the House Counsel asking that the computer and documents in Mr. Foley's office be protected to preserve any potential evidence as it seeks a case against Foley. We'll attempt to recap the story so far in a moment. First, let's bring in our own political correspondent, David Schuster, in Washington. David, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Late today, a fellow Republican congressman, Mr. Lewis of Kentucky, canceled this fundraising event he has with the Speaker, Hastert, next week. The third lead Republican in the House, Mr. Blunt, said he would have handled this differently than Mr. Hastert has. When does this start to qualify as death by 1,000 cuts for the Speaker?
It's already started, Keith, and in fact tonight we've been told by every lawmaker, every Republican lawmaker we've called has said that Dennis Hastert will not be the Speaker of the House this time next week. Furthermore, some Republicans say that a group of top Republicans in the House have already started talking amongst themselves about which one of them is going to make the call to Denny Hastert or personally fly and see him and make the case that the Republicans simply cannot survive this week with him as Speaker and that he has to step down. That's how serious it is for the Republicans. They say they are dead unless Speaker Hastert resigns in the next week. Again, Keith, they say the problem is not that Denny Hastert was Speaker of the House at a time when Congressman Foley was having these lewd exchanges with the congressional pages and the former pages. The problem, they say, has been the way that Speaker Hastert and the top leadership handled it this week. On Monday, Hastert said that he couldn't remember the emails. Then on Tuesday, he told Rush Limbaugh he suddenly had a memory being refreshed, and that he did remember a contact a year ago. Now it turns out perhaps 2 years ago. Republicans say the shifting stories, the shifting explanations, that in and of itself is going to cost Denny Hastert his job as Speaker.
But, David, if Hastert goes down, wouldn't it also implicate the other Republican lawmakers like Congressman Reynolds and the Majority Leader, Mr. Boehner? Is there not something of a domino conceivably in effect here?
Absolutely, and Republicans we speak with tonight, Keith, say that there's simply no protection for those congressmen. For Boehner, for example, they say that his problem was that he was the first one to essentially shoot at Denny Hastert Friday night, saying, well, I had spoken to Hastert. Then Boehner said, no, I hadn't. Then again on the radio station in Ohio, Boehner said, well, yeah, I did speak to Hastert. Boehner's story has shifted all over the place. Reynolds' problem, as you mentioned, is that Reynolds took money from Foley. Furthermore, Reynolds is in a heck of a fight for his re-election seat in New York, and that in and of itself might cause the major problem for him.
It now appears, we're hearing, that male pages were first warned to steer clear of Congressman Foley, at least according to those that the Washington Post spoke to, in 1995. That's 11 classes of pages ago. Is there the potential here for this story to keep getting worse no matter who resigns, as long as there are more former pages who have not come forward?
Absolutely. And the great fear, Keith, is when you look at the news conference that Foley's lawyer had last night, he went to great pains to say Congressman Foley did not have sex with any minors. The problem with that is that the age of a minor in Florida is 18. In Washington, it's 16. So you still have the ugly prospect that somebody might emerge who was a page, who had some sort of relationship with Congressman Foley. This thing could get even uglier as long as the attention is still focused on Foley, and that's another reason why Republicans say they need a clean break from everybody who is associated with this.
And briefly, David, any guidance yet in Washington about whether or not there might have been crimes committed here outside of that definitional question that you just raised about the age of consent?
Well, law enforcement officials say that based on what we know now, just based on the emails and the computer messages and the text messages, that is not enough, they say, to actually charge Foley, because the point being that it is not illegal to merely have sexual banter with a minor, that it's got to be something greater than that. But that's why they would look at the text messages and see, for example, if Foley tried to arrange any liaisons or any meetings with these youngsters at the time that he was sending these text messages.
MSNBC's David Schuster, who, as you heard there, his sources suggesting to him throughout Capitol Hill that Dennis Hastert will not be Speaker of the House of Representatives this time next week. David, great thanks for your reporting tonight.
Thanks, Keith.
It is and should be the case that the Foley scandal is fodder for politics now. But is there any evidence that those who knew, including the most powerful members of Congress, were motivated by politics in their handling of it before it became public? It was real political motive to cover up Mr. Foley's actions and keep him in office, not just protecting his House seat and control of the House, but preserving Foley's cash flow. He has given $750,000 to Republican campaigns, most of it to the NRCC, the campaign committee that doles out money to House Republicans. But mere motive is not sufficient to determine whether politics actually trump the safety of minors. So we're attempting tonight to examine the correlation between what was said and what was done. Last September, Republican Congressman Rodney Alexander learned that one of his pages had been sent emails by Foley. Alexander's staff then contacted Speaker Dennis Hastert's office. According to roll call, they were referred to Hastert's top political advisor. Hastert's office notified the House clerk, who oversees the page program, and told Republican Congressman John Shimkus, who chairs the three-person page board. The page board, however, is responsible for the behavior of the pages. Member behavior is overseen by the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee was not told. In fact, Shimkus had a hint of Foley's interest in pages back in 2002.
And now someone who spends a lot of time with you also, Mr. Mark Foley.
But Shimkus didn't tell the other two members of Congress who sit on the page board about the new emails. Shimkus only told Foley, and only told him to stop emailing the page who had come forward. But when that page contacted Alexander's office, he included additional information not acted on, like this. Cariana said there was a congressman that did hit on pages, and the fact that Foley emailed another page, Will, who Foley said was in really great shape. No one appears to have made any effort to interview Cariana or Will or determine whether Foley did not just email but also hit on pages. This spring, Alexander decided to tell two more people about Foley's emails, Majority Leader John Boehner and Congressman Tom Reynolds, whose primary job chairing the Republican campaign committee is to help it win elections, and who, knowing about these emails, later still urged Foley to run again this year. Speaker Hastert first said he had only learned about Foley last Friday, but Boehner disputed that, saying Hastert told him in the spring that it was taken care of. Boehner first retracted his statement, but changed back again on Monday of this week.
I believe I talked to the Speaker, and he told me it had been taken care of.
GOP sources telling roll call that Reynolds had told Hastert earlier in 2006, shortly after the February 2nd GOP leadership elections. All that coming before today's report that Hastert's office had been warned about Foley in 2003 by Kirk Fordham. According to the L.A. Times, Mr. Fordham, who had worked for Foley, used to accompany the congressman, quote, to keep him out of trouble. Fordham moved on to work until today for Congressman Reynolds. His campaign committee had gotten $100,000 in August from Foley. And last week, Fordham was back advising Foley before ABC broke the story about the internet communications. ABC says Fordham offered an exclusive about Foley's resignation if ABC would keep Foley's instant messages a secret. Fordham's own lawyer tells the L.A. Times, quote, it was an attempt to shield his boss from the political storm. And about that resignation, Fordham credits Reynolds with getting Foley to resign.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Foley's lawyer says otherwise.
this was a life decision, not a tactical one made by others.
Speaker Hastert took credit, too.
We found out about it, asked him to resign. He did resign. He's gone.
This despite the fact that he had told reporters the day before, quote, we really didn't have a chance to ask him to resign. Once the story did get out, it was first minimized.
There have been other scandals, as you know, that have been more than simply naughty emails.
Then the Republican Party shot down Democratic calls for immediate investigation.
Mr. Speaker, as a mother and a grandmother and the leader of this House, Democrats, on that I...
Regardless of who is playing politics now, ABC says its source was not a Democrat, and in fact only Republicans knew about all this before last week. On the issue of how they viewed it before last week, Hastert is clear. He may not remember if Reynolds told him about Foley last spring, but he does remember whether the context was about protecting children or protecting someone else.
He would have told me that, in the context maybe of half a dozen or a dozen other things. I don't remember that.
I mean, other allegations of improper emails?
No, it's just other things that might have affected campaigns. It's probably a whole stack of political things that we were going through at the time.